Hello and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup. I'm Megan Rounds, your host, and I am so happy to see you here today. Today's guest lives in Gilbert, Arizona, and is a supervisor at the City of Mesa's Customer Service Department. In addition to that, and the time he spends in the lab, he is also a student working towards an interdisciplinary degree in organizational leadership and political science at Arizona State University, with only 7 classes left to go. So send him positive energy for that. And that he can maintain his 3.8 average, which is pretty amazing. And if that is not enough, he's also a dad with 2 daughters, 9-year-old Tatum and Rylan, who turns 8 in January. He cares for the girls on weekends with a full schedule of visiting parks, museums, cultural events, and movie days. And Chris, if you ever consider adopting me because you sound like an awesome dad. You know? He's been a member of the lab for around a year and a half now, and in that time has become a moderator, spending most of his time in the lab light room and here in the main lab. His main modalities include clairaudience, channeling, and he's currently practicing voice channeling, and healing. He told me in describing his interests that they are like what journalist Katie Couric described of hers, 5 miles long but an inch deep. And let me tell you, I can so relate to that. I have the same. I love that quote from Katie Couric. Please give a warm Lightworker welcome to Chris Hofmann. Woohoo! And there he is. Yay! Hi.
Hi. How's it going?
I'm having a fabulous day. How about you?
Yep. Awesome.
Oh,
Am I coming through okay?
Yeah. Seriously thinking
All right,
about
perfect.
getting some of that headset because, I mean, sound quality is so good.
It was nice because I got my new computer for school and then these came free, so I didn't have to pay for it.
You know, that is such a spectacular deal. Those are pretty expensive, really. I mean, they're up there with Bose
Yeah.
and all of those other, well, costly but really good headsets.
Exactly. They kind of squeeze my ears, so they're a little painful, but
All
I
right,
love them.
good to know. I have a big head. I mean, not ego, but it's like it's like, okay, if it's going to squish my head and it's going to start looking like an hourglass, that's something to take into consideration.
Exactly. I can only keep them on for like an hour and a half, so this is
excellent.
perfect timing.
Well, I like to start all of our conversations with, I've kind of expanded it to include 1 or 2 questions, but kind of the same thing. So it's either or both.
Cool.
What was your path to the Lightworkers Lab? Or what was your spiritual journey? I really, I'd love to hear the full spiritual journey part because we have plenty of time for that.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. I'll get into it. It is kind of goes in line with each other. They're very along the same path. So awesome. Hi, everybody. I love you guys all. Thank you so much for being here. So really my spiritual journey started about 4 or 5 years ago. It was after me and my ex-wife started separating. And it was really like this feeling of shame, feelings of like, I built this life that I was told I should be building. And now it's falling apart. And it was really upsetting and scary. And I started I was like really in a lot of anger and fear and frustration. And I just woke up like every day, like, like, get me out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I can't do it. And I'd wake up and put a smile on my face and go along my day. And every day I would just come home and be like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I can't, like, and I just remember one day Googling, how do you not be angry? I didn't want to be angry anymore. I didn't want to be frustrated all the time. And I Googled it, and what came up was Buddhism. And and so I started reading about the Dalai Lama and getting a few of his books and learning I guess you could say religion of Buddhism, but the foundation of Buddhism. And I started meditating. And that was like the first time that I could, I'm ADD. I was diagnosed as a child. Like, I'm always going a million miles a minute. And that was the first time like I would just sit there and be calm and be peaceful. And
I have questions already, so it's like, do I jump in now? Because I
Okay.
don't want to disrupt your flow of conversation with this.
We'll
Okay.
always bring it back. So yeah,
Well,
what were you gonna say?
so some people, including myself, in the meditation journey, the journey towards meditation, have found it
Hmm.
really hard to just sit down and
Yep.
do it. Did something work? I
Yes.
mean, did it just work for you right away because you were so interested in releasing that anger? And let me tell you, we share that. My husband has told me that I'm an angry person, where I'm like, not really. I'm really not. Maybe just around you, man. You know?
Exactly. I'm
Yep.
just mad at you, okay?
He didn't like that answer.
No, for real. Exactly. Like maybe if you were pissing me off all the time.
Exactly. Yes. Hello. And yes, I'm hearing messages around that. Okay. So yeah.
Yep. It's like, okay, stand back. We're not learning right now. For real. It really was difficult at first. Like it took me probably a good six,
Mm,
7, 8 months of just sitting there doing nothing. And that's not my personality. I've never been one to just chill. So that was
mm,
very difficult. It was
mm.
a learning process. What really helped me was
Mm,
sounds, nature sounds, the binaural beats, listening to
mm.
affirmations, like the same affirmation over and over and over again. I'm happy, I'm loved, and it seems so silly at the time because I didn't have the lab then. I was just laying on my floor, like trying not to be so
Yeah.
frustrated, you
Did you
know?
find you rebelled against those affirmations at first? Did they? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I thought it was stupid. I thought it was silly. I thought, I mean, it was going against everything that I had been telling
Mm,
myself for
yeah.
25 years. So I rejected that. You kind of, I don't want to say brainwashed, but that's the word that comes to mind. You get
Yeah.
brainwashed into that. And when you're told something that goes against that mental conditioning, it's hard to not only accept that, but then integrate
Yeah.
that. It takes a long
Yeah.
time.
So when you integrate, I mean, did you notice when it had become integrated?
Yeah, the first experience that I had, it wasn't in my head, going back to that time, I was laying on my bed meditating, and all of a sudden I just felt like this rush of energy in my feet. And I was like, okay, what is this? And I just so clearly had like this image of
Oh.
Jesus, and he was washing my feet. And I was like, okay, you're making that up because why would, I grew up in
Mhm.
church conditioning, you don't, you're not as good as that. You know what I mean?
So, like,
So it really tripped me out.
wow. That must have
Yeah,
taken some time to process.
it really did. Like even now looking back to it, I'm like, oh, what were you doing there?
Yeah, but what a profound sign. That's amazing.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and I didn't know about spiritual guides. I hadn't found Crystal on YouTube yet, so it I didn't have anything in my head that would tell me that that was a
Mm,
possibility, that that was something that could happen, that that was something that
mm,
was happening. And so that's how I could kind of rationalize that it did happen to me because my brain would never have said that you would get your feet
right.
washed by Jesus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Just
Like that's
wasn't on
not
the
something
radar
that
for your
I would ever have said.
conscious mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For real.
Wow.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, so that was pretty intense, and I had a few experiences after that, just feeling,
Mm,
rushes of love and peace and calm, and it took about 8 months before I could just sit there and be comfortable with not only processing my thoughts as they were coming in, but then to start
mm.
quieting them and focus more on the feelings.
That
So
Yeah, well,
self-taught.
that's good for you. And I have to say, from a self-taught perspective, around 8 months, that's actually pretty quick. That's a life-changing,
Yep,
transformative thing that you went through.
definitely. And I think I needed it. I was ready for it and I was accepting it however
Mm,
it came. I didn't really know starting out that that was something that would change my life, but I knew that I needed something and I followed those instincts
Wow.
to do
Well,
it.
good for you.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
let's go
thank
back to
you.
the journey. So you discovered and practiced
Okay.
meditation and experienced some pretty transformative things
Yep.
as a result.
Definitely. And it kind of started my learning process. I studied Hinduism and started breaching out of different religions. I grew up Catholic, Christian, and then in my marriage, I converted to LDS, the Latter-day Saints, Mormonism. So I'd always been around that, and I always had a strong connection to meeting with people and being around people and people of like minds. So in those situations, it brought me a lot of love and a lot of joy. I remember people standing up bearing testimony, and I'd just be like sobbing. And I was like 11, 12 years old, like what teenagers like worried about other people's feelings. I didn't know what empath
Sure.
was or anything, but I was really taking on a lot of feelings from other people. So after I started looking at different religions, it was about January of last year, 2017. I was just on YouTube, probably looking up meditations or something, and Crystal popped up, and I was like, "Who's this girl?" And I like
Yep.
everybody does. And I clicked on a video, and I think she was talking about spirit guides and aliens, and I was like, what is she talking about? I was like, this is kind of weird. She's a little strange. But she made me laugh, and I felt her heart, and I felt the love coming from her. So yeah, she was talking about a lot of things that were, to me at the time, weird. But there was just this connection I felt towards her. And I kept watching a few videos, and it was April of 2017. This was before the lab was open to the public, and people who were just part of her classes were joining. And so I was like, these classes are a little expensive. I'm a single person now. I have some debts from my marriage. And she had this deal where if you paid $20, you could join the lab. So I was like, okay, $20 I can do. I'll put that on my credit card. And I joined the lab in April 2017, and there was like 202 people there.
Ooh, nice number though.
Yeah, it was really small. I was like, oh my gosh, okay. And I just posted who I was, what I was doing. I've been meditating, and I'm just trying to find peace and love and find my path. I wasn't ever somebody that was very internal with who I was. I always tried to pretend to be something that I wasn't. I took conditionings from other people around me and integrated that into who I was. So I was really,
No.
it sounds weird, but
Yeah.
soul searching.
It doesn't sound weird to me at all. I think that we share that
Yep.
path. Except
Definitely,
you're getting
definitely.
to that realization way before I did, and I'm so happy that for that.
Definitely. Like, I feel like it took so long, but then I look at people who don't ever
Yeah.
do that, or, do that at 45, 50. And I think I'm very lucky in the fact that I found the lab and, was able to go through that
Yeah.
process.
Well, and wow. So it's really all happened in a short period of time. That's great.
Definitely. Very short. This month I've kind of been looking back to, like, I was just talking to my ex-wife yesterday, and we would have been married 13 years, and we've been divorced about 4 or 5 years now. And so it kind of took me back to that time where I was like
Yeah.
so frustrated and so angry and scared and sad, and I can't believe that person. It's a completely different life that I'm experiencing now. I'm so grateful
Well,
for it.
and what's going through my head right now is I've been doing a lot of my own work, inner work, but also professionally around finding our truth
Hmm.
and living to our truth. And what
Yep.
I hear from other people who have accomplished that, it seems, and I know it doesn't mean life is perfect all the time, but
Exactly.
that things happen really quickly. It's kind of like doors open, and then it's just fast moving from there when you're on the
Yep.
right path. And I've thought that for a long, long
Yep.
time. And then when I start, yeah, it's
It's so
just
true.
amazing. So 4 to 5 years, it may sound long to some people, but after being in one space for 20 years, that's a long time to me. Now, then there are
Exactly.
people who have been married for
Exactly.
50 years. My parents are having a 50th wedding anniversary coming up. And
Oh,
it's actually
wow.
gotten me to think a lot about that, because it's like I can imagine 50 years because I'm older than that, but not much. and
Yep.
and that,
Yep.
yeah.
That blows my mind. Like 50 years,
It
that's a
is.
long time.
Yeah, it
That's a
is.
life.
And then there, I have people in my family 75 years marriage, and I'm just like, I
Wow.
don't know if personally that's the path for me. And that's a
Exactly. For real.
long time. And it's
It
different
is.
for every person though. There are people who would be like, this is
Yep.
the life I want. This is exactly right for me, and good
Yep.
for them.
And it's like, as long as you're happy with that and that's your
Yeah.
truth, then yeah, more power to you. But if it's
Yeah.
not, then it's
Well, and I
not.
think we all get to a point where we have to pay attention to those, to those
Hmm.
signs, but also just if you're thinking there's got to be something better than this, or why am I so angry and frustrated all of that time? I love that you Googled that. Um, it
I
just,
know. It was really like, I just totally remember that. Like, how do you not be angry? I can't
yeah.
take this
Well, and
anymore.
I'd say that's a pinnacle moment. That's where you discovered Buddhism and,
Definitely.
and the Dalai Lama and this whole
Yep.
trajectory, which is just
Yep.
amazing. And
Definitely. And it was like that moment where I shifted from not wallowing in it and not keeping
yeah,
it going. Because when you're in that spot, the ball just keeps rolling and rolling, rolling until you do something that says,
yeah.
"Stop! I can't do this." And no, it didn't change overnight. Of course not. And I mean, yesterday I was working on an assignment for school, and I had finished like 6 pages, and I had been saving it the entire time. I
Oh
know I had,
no.
because I did it 2 weeks ago. Yes. I've been doing it 2 weeks ago where I deleted everything, and so I knew I was saving it. And I went to go email it to my professor, and it was like back to square one, like where I had opened it that morning. And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And then I had a temper tantrum. I'm not like, I went right back into that.
Yep, yep. And those are default behaviors. Those are things that we again have
Yep.
learned through most of our lives. And even that, I'm guessing,
Yep.
is improving. Even though you probably went on a bit of a
Exactly.
tirade, I can say I have gone on that. Just the other day, that happened with me as well. Except I was able to
Yep.
find it, but it wasn't. I shouldn't say it wasn't important. Important. It was like a personal channel message that was important to me,
Yep.
because it was like a lot of
Aw,
stuff there. And I
exactly.
did find it, but I found it
Yeah.
after I chilled. Because I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to
Yeah.
do what I've done before. Now, I have said, no, this is just
Yep.
putting a positive spin, and you might be like, that's a bunch of BS because you just went through it. But sometimes when that happens, you create something even better.
It's true. I will agree with that. Because like after I had my temper tantrum and was screaming and yelling and blaming everybody else around me, um, I rebalanced pretty
Yeah.
darn quickly, and I was kind of proud of myself. I was just like, okay, we're gonna connect, and it was like I won't say I channeled it, but like it was free flow.
Yeah.
I just was able to get it back out, turn it on time, and move on. But we all had those little mishaps, but it's how you
Yeah.
rebalance yourself. It's how you. I always think of that bobbing,
Oh, yeah,
like
like a
when you're
bobber.
fishing, that little
Yep.
bobbing thing on the sea. Yep. Sometimes we do go below
Well,
water, but how quick do
we're
you bob back
human.
up?
We're here on this earth
Yep.
as humans,
Yep.
and we have emotions, and there are people who are even keel all of the time. I tend to be
Hmm.
um, I okay, I don't know who's watching today, and if you're an even keeled person, I hope I don't ever do this to you. But for people who are even keeled, I seem to have this interest in pushing some buttons to try to get, it's just like, hey, poke, poke. Now, my
I feel
husband
that.
fits into that category, so
Yep.
it's like, dude, you don't ever show any emotion, and like you need to. So, oh
Yep.
my gosh.
Pride
And
of the little bear.
my daughter is an expert at this. She could write a book. It's so amazing, and it's fun for me to watch, but not really, because he gets kind of upset. But she can find
Exactly.
every little thing, and then he kind of goes into this a 8-year-old thing. It's like, no, I'm not. You
Yep,
are.
yep,
I know you
totally.
are, but what am I? And it's like, what? Who is this person?
I
But I
love
think that
that.
it's
That's so
important
funny.
because that stuff has to get out. There's stuff that he hasn't, processed, and
It's
I don't want to
true.
do that for him before he's ready. But I mean, my daughter is, but she's 11 and doesn't understand those boundaries in the same way.
Yep. Yep, they don't.
Yeah,
Not at
but I
that
do
age.
think you're right about that. I mean, of course, I think everybody has different perspectives around this, but I think that point about the time it takes to rebound is a really one to pay attention to, because sometimes people get down
Hmm.
on themselves for having the reaction in the first place. And it's
For
like,
real. You
it
gotta
happens. Yeah,
get it
exactly.
out.
A thought went through my head, and I have these all the time, so don't think I'm going to do this. But I think it'd be really fun to
Uh,
tape those tirades and just have a channel of just that. Let it out.
oh, I know. I mean, it would be
It
kind of
would.
scary to watch, for real,
Probably
but
also kind of fun,
it's true.
funny. In retrospect, it's like,
I
I don't
always
know if
think
I want
about,
everyone to see that, but
I know for real. Well, you think about like when people talk about the life review and how we're all
is
just
that
like
what we're going
watching
to see?
everything. I'm like, oh, I'm like, please, can I just skip by it? I'm gonna call it
Exactly.
late. I need to
Well,
go
there's going to be a lot of good
fast.
stuff in there too. I hope it's not all just loaded
For
towards the
real,
tantrums, and what I mean. Although at the same point,
definitely,
it's like, yeah, I
exactly.
remember that.
That will be a good part because I do kind of focus solely on the negative and
Mm.
what I do wrong a lot. So seeing all those little interactions where you don't really pay attention or see, I think that
Well,
would
I
be
think that
beautiful.
there's a lot that we do that we're not even aware of that we do. We plant the seed for other people, and people have planted seeds for us that we may not even realize. And it's like
Definitely,
how we interact
definitely.
as a population to be able to influence each other in ways we
Yep.
don't really know. And it's kind of this is your, or wait, is that it? It's a Wonderful Life moment where he goes and he sees what would be,
Yes.
what things would be like without him. He
Yeah.
had no idea he was having
Yes.
that kind of influence on people.
Exactly. It's like the Prince of Egypt, like that
Mm.
tapestry, where we're all part of that little tapestry and we all have those little connections. I was listening to a channel by Cryon and he was talking about like our Merkaba and how big it can be. So just because you don't have somebody else in that other room, their energy field could be
Yeah.
reaching you. And I was like, I sit on the top floor and I always think like I can hear people's thoughts like below me. And, with their energy field so close, and you could be having an effect on somebody. So it kind of made me feel like, we're never alone. We always have
Oh,
somebody
yeah.
there,
Yep.
somebody affecting
I
us.
my brain just split into two different areas I want to go to with that. There's the part about well, one is just that for me, I really like to especially with my daughter's friends early on, it's like to
Hmm.
identify what I see as their strengths. And I remember this one girl, I think
Yep.
they must have been about 5 or 6 years old, and we had a little birthday sleepover kind of thing. And this is not my norm. This is not me as
Yeah.
this is actually like a horror movie for me in the sense of having a bunch of little girls for a birthday party, which some people love and thrive on, and I'm just like, oh my god. But
Seriously.
it
No,
was
I feel that.
fun, and they did like a little fairy garden, and I had them do some kind of art
Yeah.
project. And this one girl drew this thing, and I just said, you're quite the artist. You really have some great ways to express things. And she's like, no one's ever called me an
Oh, that's
artist
beautiful.
before. And it made me feel really good
Oh,
because I've done that since then to people where it's
yeah.
like, well, what I see in you is this, and it's something they hadn't really ever thought about before, and it seems to make their day. And sometimes they do. There was somebody where some dude I dated a long time ago, I had this computer, and
Hmm.
it was, that was when computers were like new. and a
Yeah.
lot of people didn't have computers, and it was a desktop kind of thing, and I had moved
Excuse me.
on short notice from California to Minnesota where I live now, and I left that
Hmm.
computer behind. I decided it was old enough, and I'm like, you can just have it. Well, that guy's like,
Yeah.
thank you for doing that and for exposing me to this life of computers. I'm now in school for computer programming, and I'm like, wow, that's so cool. How
Wow.
awesome is that?
It's
And so
so
it makes me wonder
true.
if we have lessons, or if there's roles we play in other people's lives, that at some point those roles or lessons, or there's another word I'm losing, but if that type of influence we have on each other at some point is no longer necessary, and sometimes it's a life of that.
Yes. Yes, completely. Like with my ex, like, as much as he frustrates me and I want to slap him across the face, like I can see like how much I've changed just by being exposed to him and seeing a focus shift from externally into internally in myself. And maybe he was pretty selfish and went totally inside of himself, but we always learn something from somebody. I totally
when
think
we're
that's true.
open to it. And sometimes it's forced, when there's a relationship that ends and the other person doesn't see it coming because they weren't really, I don't know. Sometimes they just don't see it coming. Whereas the other person's like, how could you not see that coming? Because we're just in different places. Oh, I think the other thing was that energy you were talking about and how influential that can be. It's something that I have a pretty strong passion around, because we've only ever learned to trust and believe in the physical. And there's this whole other...
That's a huge paradigm shift.
Well, and it's so important, I think, because if we're not paying attention to the influences around us, and a lot of those are energetic, because, I mean, we all have things going on in our heads that we're not telling other people about. And some people can pick up on that and sense it, and other people have been conditioned where they just do not either even recognize or listen to those feelings anymore because they've been learned to distrust them. They've been taught to distrust them.
For real. Exactly. And it's kind of hard, like with the spiritual awakening that we're going through, like if you haven't always had that thought process to be exposed to that, it's very difficult to shift that mindset around that. It takes a lot of trust. But I remember like walking through in high school and just walking through the grass and feeling so many different emotions, and I just thought I was kind of bipolar, like going up and down. But we do pick up on that. And it's very fascinating. Like, I really think that's part of the process of how we can read people and how we can attune ourselves to higher realms of information and stuff. It's very fascinating to me.
There's one thing I'm practicing now in a small scale, but would like to do larger, is, kind of visiting the astral and looking at a company, let's say, and how they all operate and what is the energy at a higher perspective, higher energetic perspective. And, how can you send energy or, I don't want to meddle in a negative way. But if somebody hires me and says, hey, will you do this for me? I'd like to come in and be like, there's a whole other world you're not paying attention to, and it's dramatically affecting the culture of your organization.
Yes.
And so.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I think something Eric and Neely is coming to mind about something in the spiritual course, something along those lines too, like being able to change the culture of a company and how they interact. That's much needed.
I think that's that's the very close future for that work. I know that. So you're in organizational leadership and political science. So you may be studying some aspects of that. I can't tell. It's a really interesting combination, by the way. What led you to that?
It is. So I work at the city of Mesa. So I'm in a small town municipality, and it was the closest business thing that I had that they would pay for. And then my ex, he was like all into political science, and I'd never been part of the political game. I always thought it was just like, all right, those people do that. So I really wanted to learn so I could debate with him and tell him off. So that's really why I started the political science. And I knew, like, I worked at a city, so I knew that political process was part of that. So I wanted to learn and try to promote within at the city. So I just thought it was a good choice and a good fit to promote.
Well, I wonder, are there things you can use from political science in, the corporate setting? I mean, I would say probably, because they're political too, just not political, like outwardly.
Definitely.
Well, sometimes they're outwardly political. I worked for a political organ, or like a political subsidy of a state-run agency. So it was political and political.
Oh, wow. Yes.
Yeah, that was really awesome.
And it's true. They're both about learning how people interact, organizational leadership is how behaviors at work, and political science is behaviors in between the government and the people and non-governmental agencies. So it's all about behaviors. I like learning
Yeah.
about people. So it really kind of incorporated that learning as well. It's just basically learning how people think, how people act, and what the repercussions or
Well,
outcomes
and
are.
I'm wondering, from an empath perspective, you have a lot more information than some people who aren't connected to that part of themselves
Definitely.
have. So how,
Yeah. It's nice as a supervisor to have that kind of in my back pocket because I can connect to people in that way that I kind of know what's going on without them having to tell me if they
mm,
don't feel comfortable. Especially like on the phones and stuff, like before I was a supervisor, like just working customer service, you kind of pick up on what the situation is without having to tell them what the
right.
situation is. So it was
Have you
nice.
found that, how do I want to word this question? That just that you're using your gifts in ways you never really realized before.
Yeah, for real. I think definitely in my personal life, I can see it like with my daughters and how, I mean, that was really what my motivation was to
Mm.
start this, was to be a good dad and to be happy around them and to teach them how to have a happy,
Yes.
loving life. So I love like today, like when I started to do the live, they put on a yoga video and they were doing yoga
Oh my
in the middle of the
gosh.
room. So I'm just
That is
like,
so amazing.
I know, and they're all into crystals now. And I remember one time, like I'll be feeling like yesterday after I was having my temper tantrum, like they came and like massaged my
Oh, that's
back at
so
Chipotle.
sweet.
They're like, "Daddy, you okay?" So I love how it's having that effect in my personal life with them. But certainly at work, I think I've gotten a lot stronger
Mm.
boundaries with and in touch with my own self and my feelings and my truth. So now I know the difference when it's coming from other people and outside influences. So I think that's the biggest change since like
Mm.
this year, really. I mean, I only started kind of doing the psychic stuff in January of this year. So it really was a quick change to be able to see like what my feelings are and what I'm getting from other people. And that distinction really helps to clarify how you feel and what's going on. So that was definitely the biggest shift I experienced at
How
work.
do other people, are you overt in your spirituality at work, or is that something you keep reserved?
It's kind of something that I just like with my sexuality, and I've always been one that
Mm.
if people ask, I'm completely honest and open book. But I don't go around like
Look at
wearing
me.
it on my
I'm a
sleeve.
light worker.
Exactly. But like I have like my crystals in front of me. Like I have my
Oh, that's
selenite
great.
wand in front of me at work, and I brought my cards to work and given people a few readings. This was like before I was a supervisor. But I've definitely been open about it. One of my coworkers knows that I do readings and stuff, and we talk about it a lot. So it's definitely like I don't know. Like I said, I don't wear it on my sleeve or my
Yeah,
badge all the time, but I'm definitely open about it and willing to discuss it when I feel
I love
comfortable.
that. And I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah.
I lived in Arizona, but it was a while ago. And I mean, when was it? In the late 80s, early 90s, before some
Oh, yeah,
people
yeah.
watching were born, maybe, you know?
Exactly. A
Yeah.
little pup.
And I lived in Tucson, so it was a college town too, in many respects. And I know,
Hmm.
like, well, especially Phoenix, but Mesa and all of those things, there's so much more going on than just university stuff. But I think college towns
Definitely.
have more openness oftentimes than ones that don't have a university in their
For
area.
sure.
But there's no way I would
For
have.
real.
And my spiritual journey started after that, as far as my own awareness. But
Hmm.
I kept a lot to myself because I didn't feel that the people around me were all that accepting of anything different than them. Now that may have been, I worked
That's
on
hard.
as a screen printer, printing things for fraternities and sororities. So, that, not that people in those are closed-minded, that's not necessarily the case. But at the time, at that age,
Yep.
there was a lot of judgment.
They're looking for a little
Yeah.
something different.
And I
Yep.
never really fit into that particular persona. So it was like, yeah, you can get to know me in terms of my name and maybe my age and a little bit more about me and my background, but that's as far as I'm allowing
Yep.
it because, too risky.
The surface
Yeah.
stuff. And it's true. You got to feel comfortable with exposing. I mean, nobody needs to be out on YouTube expressing everything if you don't feel comfortable doing that. It's all about your comfort level. I think for me, it was just more of like, I did that life. I
Yeah.
tried to be like everybody else. I tried to do what you thought I should be doing with my life. And I'm sick of it. Like, look at where it led me. It took me down a dark path where I didn't even want to be living
Yeah.
anymore. Like, sorry, I have to live
Well,
for me
and
now.
I think that's what's
And
necessary. I think it takes,
Yep.
full belief that this is who I am, and I don't really care if you like it or not, other people. That's not really
Yep.
it's not your life.
Yep.
It's mine, and I have to live my life.
Exactly.
But that in and
Exactly.
of itself is a
And
process.
it doesn't mean that I don't. It's true, and it doesn't mean that I don't have those moments
Yeah.
where I'm like, oh my god, like someone talked about it.
Yep.
Now I'm freaking out. I mean, that still happens occasionally,
Me
you know.
too. Yeah. And it all depends on context. I've been really digging into the
Exactly.
context, the nuances of different situations. So,
It's true.
okay, I had all these questions, but I didn't write them all down. So, working in customer service for a city, how do you manage the stress? I'm assuming those are stressful jobs. Maybe not, but
Yeah. It's very stressful. I mean, like much customer service, you're working with people who are angry and people who don't really have a lot of direction for their anger. So they are directing it at you. It was very, very difficult. Like, I mean, I think a lot of my frustration with just my life in general at that time was also from getting that stress bombarded at me from everybody at work. And yeah, there's great people and happy people on the phone, but when you have like 10, 20 people a day yelling at you and directing their anger at you, it gets very frustrating. And then it really, I mean, being in the lab and learning about my truth and learning about who I was as a person, as a divine person, as someone that can not protect myself, but, have those boundaries around me. It really helped to not take in that energy and really actually just focus on they're pissed off, they're yelling at me, but they're not mad at me. I always took everything so personally, like, oh my God, like I want to come to your house and beat you up because you're yelling at me.
yeah.
But at the same time, that was my job. I chose to be there. Yeah, I didn't feel like I had a way out, but in the end, I chose to be there and I chose to come into work every day and not look for another job. So I was making that choice. So I just, stood up, did my Selenite wand right before I walked in, told Archangel Michael to like be standing guard.
Did you notice as you were doing that if I'm hearing correctly, you had that job before exiting your former relationship and before doing your spiritual journey.
Yep.
So this is a really great, almost benchmark for for how things change.
Yes,
So
for real.
once you started
It's
using
true.
selenite and calling in Archangel Michael and any other things you did, which we'd love to hear about, because I think other people who have these types of jobs especially would benefit from that. But the other question
Definitely.
is, what did you notice, if anything, improve as a result?
So with all, like, I was also grounding and focusing on, like, when I would take my breaks, instead of just smoking a cigarette, I would go walk around the trees and just try to decompress and disconnect from that, and kind of fortify myself to get back in the game. But it really was just more of a mental shift for me about how, first of all, I chose to be there. Second of all, they're not yelling at me. They're just being frustrated and trying not to soak that anger into how I felt. And it really was kind of like it was a shift in how, when they realized that they couldn't piss me off, that I wasn't going to get angry or upset, they backed down. You know, you can only yell at somebody so much, and they're not doing anything, and you're not getting any reaction before they're like, okay, I'm sorry, blew up at you, you know, and they start retreating. So I would just stand guard, you know, hey, I'm so sorry. I feel your frustration, you know, keep a calm voice and let them vent, and then wait until they retreated, because I wasn't going nowhere. You know,
No,
I got to that.
I was just going to say that, I mean, I wrote down you held space for them and you also gave them a sense
Yes.
of safety. You know, not, I
Yeah,
use the word safety in that we feel safe expressing ourselves or being ourselves in front of the other person,
exactly.
not necessarily the physical
Definitely.
aspect, but I think that counts too,
Yep.
because they know that you're there and you held this space for them. And you weren't going to get into an argument with them because they were venting. And ultimately, all they did was the tantrum that we were talking about earlier, that we do sometimes in our
Yep.
own home by
Exactly.
ourselves, maybe. Yep.
We all know that.
They just couldn't hold it in, and they had to do it there. And they definitely directed their attention towards, or their anger towards the next person, you know, there. And they're not going to, you know, the person standing in front of them in line isn't the person they're going to direct it to, unless they, you know, do something or say something directly, you know, to provoke it. Yep.
Poke
But
the
then
bear.
the next person they engage with is that unlikely, or not unlikely, unfortunate
Exactly.
person. Wow, that is such
Definitely.
what a turnaround. I mean,
It really was. And I started not coming home like freaking out, like I hated my job and hated my life. You know, it was more of like I was, like Crystal teaches us, you know, just standing in the light. You know, you don't have to be on YouTube. You don't have to be professing your light work to everybody. You can just be that lighthouse for people that stands firm in who you are. And you don't, you can do that anywhere, at the coffee shop, you know, just holding space for
wow.
somebody, like you
Well,
said.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you start noticing? I mean, it sounds like you shifted the way you were thinking, and
Hmm.
you also did things like bringing in support from guides,
Yep.
angels,
Yep.
crystals,
Yep.
and things. Yep.
Whatever those are.
Um,
Yep.
when did you, were you always intentional about being, you know, that you could be this person who is somebody else's rock in the moment? Or did that occur to you later?
I think I've always, I think I've kind of always done that in my personal life. Like, always tried to be the one that people
Mm.
can come to and be that support system for them. But I never really thought of that
Mm.
at work. You know, I hated the fact that they were unloading on me. I hated the fact that they were calling to make their payment, but they were bitching about 25 other things. Just let me do my job. You know, I want to be the support system for you. I can't. I don't
Yeah.
want to. I
Oh,
can barely
sure.
support myself.
Because,
And then when I switched that perception to it and allowed it, it kind of calmed my feelings about it.
well, and I wonder if at the same time then you weren't absorbing it all and take, you know, like you were saying, you weren't taking, it's not
Exactly.
personal. I was thinking when
Yep.
you were saying that there's almost a full circle piece to that statement. I used to believe that, well, it depends on the perspective, I suppose. But when I remember
Hmm.
working with this dude who did something, it just pissed me off, you know. And I definitely took it
Yeah.
personally because I believed it was intentionally against me,
Exactly.
right? And so I'm
Yep.
like, you know, they say it's business, it's not personal, but it is personal because we take it personally, right? Except now,
Exactly.
I know much more about those things and people's behaviors and how they express them. And that may have been his behavior. And he may have
Hmm.
decided to do something because he didn't want me to be in the know or something, you know, whatever the reason was. But ultimately, it
Yep.
was his issue, not mine. And so I don't think when
Exactly.
people say it's business, not personal, that's what they're thinking about. But I do think it's how we receive that information as to whether or not we take it personally or not, and recognizing it's really them. I mean,
Exactly.
you know,
Yep. For real. It's all about them. It's how you receive it and how you
yeah,
perceive it, you know?
yeah. And I mean, what a
It's so
big
true.
change. And I love that you recognize the being the rock and being, you know, the steady, you know, support person for people close to
Hmm.
you, you know, at home, and not necessarily that may not have been your role at work until you may have decided. And I don't know if you made a conscious choice, but that, yeah, because
I did, yeah.
that's just, I mean, a big thing. Like, you know, they're just they're just expressing themselves. It has nothing to do with me. That must have been such a huge weight lifted off of your shoulders.
Definitely. And how it affected the workers
Oh,
around
yeah.
me, when they could hear people screaming and yelling at me, and I was just sitting there, playing Tetris.
Were you really?
I totally forgot about that. Yes, those two stories hit me so hard, so
Excellent.
accurate.
I am so happy to hear that, because I'm like, I have no idea. We did not talk
Yes,
about this ahead of time. Like, what story should I read?
yes. I was like, oh my
Excellent.
God.
Oh, man.
I'd be playing those mindless games to keep me distracted and focus on how I felt in my body, and staying in that moment. And yeah, I could hear somebody yelling at me and going off on the phone, but I didn't have that reaction. I wasn't focused directly on how they were feeling. I was more focused on what they were saying, so I could try to figure out a way to consciously tell them, I feel you, I understand you, but here's the problem. Here are your solutions.
Awesome. Well, I have often, something I feel pretty strongly about is that people, when they're in distress, these people clearly are in distress. They're not always walking around yelling at people, most likely. I mean, they could be, I suppose, but they're really upset about something. When you're in distress, you don't see the way out. And it takes somebody else to provide that structure. And it's not just all you need to do is this. It's like you have to take their hand and pull them out. And so what I heard you do, this is a problem, here's what I see as solutions, is like a really great way to do that. And then do they just make a choice?
Usually they kind of try to whine a little bit more, and I'm like, okay, let me repeat what I just said. I'm just going to repeat the same thing over and over and over until you want to decide that you're done being upset. And it's kind of interesting how I kind of do that, in my readings now. I listen, I hear you, and I'm going to give you a little bit of support, some empathy, and tell you how I feel about the situation, maybe. But then here's your options. Here's your choices. And I'm going to leave you to make them yourself, So it kind of was a little precursor to that. And it's crazy, that shift in my thinking really did change my job. I became more of a counselor. I was teaching people my coworkers and stuff, I was teaching them how to interact by example. And it's my supervisor job, I just got that in June of this year. The last time that I applied, it was about 2 years ago. And I submitted my application and then ended up going to the bar that night and completely blackout drunk. I shouldn't have gotten that job, that job wasn't for me. But I think really shifting who I was and my perception and changing my look at the job really did set me up to get that promotion. And it's kind of funny, everybody's like, well, if Chris got that job, we all should have. But I think it was just, I was ready. I started from all of the teachings that I've done, or all the learnings that I've done for the past year and a half. It really did change that person that I was the first time I applied to when I applied 2 years later. It was just a complete different shift.
Well, and I think that is, you may have been learning it earlier when you applied for the job the first time, but the application process, the process of applying it hadn't been to the point it needed to be.
Exactly. Exactly. The practice hadn't been done yet.
But once it was, I'm so happy that that the powers that selected you recognized the shift. And maybe they didn't even know the shift, but they saw this you of today instead of remembering the you from the past. Or maybe, I think that's that's saying a lot for where you work.
Exactly. That says a lot about the powers of forgetfulness, I guess.
It was 2 years ago. I don't remember him.
Exactly. You woke up on the backside of a bar in the middle of the night. Okay, well, it's okay now. We're good. When I really think about it and process that, no, that didn't happen. That happened because I shifted. That's because I changed who I was. You try to rationalize it and go through your mental mind about what happened, but there really is no
It's
other
energy,
explanation.
your energy, you know.
Exactly.
I've known you for a couple of years now. Has it been 2 years? Yeah, I guess it kind of has, yeah. Um,
Yeah,
and
almost.
and so I didn't see the you before you found the Lightworkers Lab, but you
Hmm.
can see your joy, and you know, and it's something
Definitely.
that I find very infectious. And I've always really enjoyed when we
Oh,
talk
thank
to
you.
each other because it always reminds me about the importance of laughing, because you and I seem to laugh a lot when we talk
Yes.
to each other, and me
Yeah, I
too.
love that.
And it,
Exactly. You got to laugh through things. Like, I mean, I could give you a laundry list of all the shitty things that have happened to me, and you'd probably be like, "What the heck? How can he still smile?" But it's really your choice to get up and have that positive attitude. I always think of there's so much worse that could happen, no matter what you've
yeah.
gone through. So you got to kind of smile through it,
Well,
laugh
and I do
through it.
think that it's how we receive that information. We have filters we've all built up throughout our lives, and some of those filters are pretty well
Hmm.
ingrained, so that sometimes we still see things
Definitely.
as being personal when maybe they weren't intended that way, you know?
Exactly. No, for sure. That's so true. I totally
Yeah,
feel
but
that.
I mean, but the shift that I'm hearing in you is something that's where those filters have also changed, like your ability to work with angry people and
Hmm.
you know, hold that space for them so they can release that anger. That's quite a
Definitely,
gift.
definitely. It's still like now that I'm the supervisor taking those escalations about how, and people are now even more pissed off. Granted, it's not. Granted, it's not every day, all day, but you still get those. And sometimes I'm just like, I like to take them outside, and I listen to them outside. So I'm around my trees, and I'm in nature. Like I go outside and look at the sky, and it's those little things that you can do to try to get your mind off of what's actually being
Mm.
said to you and focus on
How do
the
you bring
issue,
that up to them where it doesn't sound like a confrontation? Because the first thing I heard is, "Let's take this outside," you know.
I know. When I said that, I was like, it's on the phone. Don't worry. I'm not taking it
Oh,
actually
okay.
outside, but I will.
Man, I could just see that.
Bend you over my knee like my 8-year-old little baby.
Oh man. Well, so thank you for
Too
sharing
funny.
all of that. That was a huge
Oh, of
transformation that
course.
I'm just so inspired by. And I'm curious, how do you
Definitely.
apply these things to school? Because that's got to be a huge, I mean, it's school is school and there's a lot of
Oh,
learning, but there's a lot of
yeah.
pressure. And when you already have a high pressure job plus parenting and, you know, all of those things, how do you
Yeah.
manage that?
I think it goes back to
Mm.
what interests you. If you're doing something that interests you and something that you get to do, like with my job, like that, it was a shitty job most days, and there was people around me that thought it was a shitty job too, but they kept coming in. So it was that shift to I
Mm.
have to I
Yeah.
get to, and then if you can, I want
Oh,
to.
yeah.
It's about shifting how you see stuff, just like what we were talking about earlier when shifting our perception about other people's actions. You can do that. With school, it gets time consuming, and I just keep saying, some people don't get to go to school. Some people have to pay for their schooling. Some girls in Africa don't even get the opportunity to go to first grade, let alone go to college. So be grateful, um, and just
Yep.
keep pushing.
I was wondering if you had like one of those Hermione Granger time things that allow you to.
Oh my God. For real, sometimes I feel like I do with all the things going on. I'm just like, how does it, like when I sit down and think about all the things that I do on a weekly basis, I'm like, I don't know how you get it done. Like, how do you actually get it done, Chris? And I don't know the
Oh, then
answer.
maybe you do, because I mean, that I've been thinking a lot about time and condensing time and expanding
Yeah.
time as it suits me rather than allowing it to
Yes.
rule me. I don't know that I have the
Yeah.
answer to that
I
yet, but
think that's very interesting, that time bending stuff. I always think about like when you're rushing to work and you're
oh,
late and, it just seems to go a little bit longer than it normally does. But when you're like, okay, I'm going to get to work on time. I'm going to
mhm.
be there on time. you know, when you change that perception about it, sometimes it just works.
That is a big tip. I learned that, oh my gosh, when I took these courses in my doctoral program that were extra, like I don't even want to call them electives, because we were chosen by one of our professors who was from Ukraine and really trained well in energetics and metaphysics. And she's like, do you want to be a part of this group? And it's like, yeah. It was very awesome. And I'm kind of like, why did you pick me? But I didn't care, because I'm like, yeah, I want to be in this. That was a part of my spiritual awakening. That was like a pinnacle part for me, is being selected for this group.
Wow.
I'm like, well, maybe she sees something I don't know. And that was helpful.
Going back to what we were talking about earlier, you know, people seeing things that we don't see in
very
ourselves.
Helpful. But so she taught us all kinds of really cool energetic techniques and things like that. And one of them was that time thing when driving, and I use it. So it could be that, you know, there's the logic mind, and then there's, you know, the emotional mind, but then there's also the energetic mind. And for me, if I'm running late, it used to be that I would hurry to get there. And then I posted in this circle, I don't know, 4 weeks ago, when I was so glad to be delayed because there was an accident where somebody died, and, you know, I saw the person on the ground, and
things like that.
Thank you for delaying me, you know, very much. Thank you for that, because I would have been in that spot. But
it's so true.
The thing that I've learned is, okay, if you can decide what time you're going to get there and hold that in your head and don't look at the clock, and you have to get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm going to get there at 5 minutes to 9. And I always meet that goal or get there even earlier. And in times when it should not have been possible, it takes 20 minutes to get to this place, and I made it in 10 without hurrying. I have no idea how it happened, but I use that. It's a good tool.
It's awesome. It is. It really is. And it's crazy. You'll start seeing the people separating, you know, like getting out of your way, the lights turning green.
And and sometimes I don't do that. And sometimes I freak out about being late. Usually it's when my family are going somewhere where we're expected. And I look at the clock, and we hit every red light, and then there's some kind of accident that is slowing us down. And then my husband will take a wrong turn. And, you know, it just all compiles into this thing where it's like, okay, what's that teaching me? Let it all go. You know, I mean, it's just making that choice. But it's amazing the power of intention, you know, and how.
It really is.
So, I mean, do you use that for like grades and papers and things too?
I don't think I ever really consciously did it, but I mean, I have set that intent that I wanted like a high GPA. Like I wanted to have my little course. Like, I don't know why.
Because you do.
Like, I didn't even care about my high school graduation, but like, I want that. I'm getting that. And I think it's just kind of to prove myself that I could do it. And I really, like I said, I really don't know how I get everything done, but it gets done and I do well. And I guess that is setting an intent and following through and trusting that I have the ability to do that. I have the energy to do that.
I think it's really a lot about that belief, you know, that you do have the power to do that. We have so much more power than most of us believe.
My gosh. Yes. And it's hard to forget, like even now, like, you know, on a daily basis, it's hard to apply that every single day, all day, you know, but
I kind of think of it as kind of like your transformation, where you made a choice and you made these other choices, and you started to practice differently and remind yourself to practice differently during trying times, and then things shifted. And so I think it's the same kind of thing for expanding our abilities through the power of intention. Not even our abilities, our awareness of, you know, and our belief in ourselves.
And those doors that open when you set that intention, you know, like coming to the lab and meeting Crystal and Compton at the Bliss Retreat and all these wonderful people at that first retreat. And then taking the Body of Light program with Lauren and Tefermo, you know, last year, you know, those are all things that I never thought would be part of my life.
It's not,
but when you're open to it.
It's not just the information, but it's all of the, like, how this can change and affect in a positive way your life. Yeah.
For real. It's so true.
Oh, there was another thing I was going to say about that, and I forgot what it was. But a part of, what was it? Doesn't really matter. Okay. I think, it's just that whole, it's that I don't know about you. It seems to me like you're pretty good at deciding and choosing the intention. I have, that's always been something I've struggled with because I've always been such a, so a part of my empath experience was getting along, going with the flow to get along, right? That was a big part of who I was as a kid.
Yep.
And I just always had done that. I mean, I kind of, one of the things I've talked about in my, from my life in my 20s was being kind of a pinball person. So I just went where, I mean, and there's an energetic aspect and an energetic flow to that, but I didn't really have intention around it. It was more like, oh, this is happening, I'll do that. Oh, this is happening, I'll do that. And, I'm glad I did that. I had a really very interesting first half, or what, I don't know. I don't want to define it in terms of time. My 20s were spectacular in many ways. Hard in some ways, challenging in some ways, but wow, what some amazing experiences because I was that pinball.
True.
For those of you who know what pinball is.
If you don't, you better.
Google it. But now I want more intention in my life, and I have a really hard time making those conscious, intentional choices before having a choice presented to me.
Definitely. That's very difficult. And, it kind of goes back to trust. I think with me, my intention when I first started, like I pictured like a chessboard, all these white and dark places. And every single every day we have like thousands of choices that we have to make. And am I going to choose a white spot towards light, love, happiness, joy? Or am I choosing a dark spot towards depression, fear, anger, frustration? And it really kind of focused me into how all those little decisions add up to a day, all add up to a week, add up to a month. And I just really focused my attention on trying to find what brought me up and getting rid of what brought me down. And I think that intention really changed, not my circumstances, but more my perception of things. And that changed physically later down the road. But that was really where my intent started. Am I choosing a white spot or a black
love that.
spot?
I think it helps so much to put it into such an easier classification. It's not every choice yet. Yeah. It's just, is it a light spot or a dark spot? And that's
exactly
genius because, for me, I get overwhelmed by too many choices. I get that decision fatigue and it's like, oh, I have to make all of these decisions about my life if I want it to be this way. And
Amen.
So you just simplified that into some really, just a great way to think about it, light, dark, good, bad, or however we define it personally.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean everything's going to fit in there, but at the same time, does it build you up or does it bring you down? It does.
Well, and it's a great, I talk about best case scenario. Because we've really been conditioned to believe, and for good reason, a lot of the times, to think about the worst case scenario. But we've gotten to the point where we think about the worst case scenario as the only scenario. It's a scenario, but there's any possible scenario out there. Why choose the worst to attract into our lives?
Yes, it's so true. It's hard because when you're in that low vibration, like that's all you really see, and that's the only one presenting itself. But when you focus your intent on finding happiness and joy and raising your vibration, it's crazy how different doors and decisions and outcomes come about.
So the intention, choosing the intention in a big picture way about choosing the light, it just helps to, it's like a guiding principle then. And then it makes it so much easier to choose when in the moment. I love that.
It's so true. I agree. And it takes practice, you don't pick one white spot and then you're going to pick 5 dark ones after that.
Yeah, so there must be some things around forgiveness and acceptance of self around that, because it's like if you go into the, you choose a dark square and it sucks, and then it's like, I did this, it's all my fault. And
exactly.
It's
so true. It's like always got to think about, you're always on your right path, you're choosing this experience in life, and it's your experiment to choose. And just because you choose something dark or something that brings you fear and frustration doesn't mean that you're not going to learn something from it, and doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It's just how you chose this way to experiment.
I love I like to look at life as a journey or an experiment. I kind of go back and forth with both, because then
Me
it makes
too.
all experiences valuable. And instead of good or
Exactly.
bad, they don't have to be labeled good or bad. And I tend to
Yep.
think there's always a lesson.
Yep.
There's always something to learn.
Definitely. Definitely. And sometimes when growing up in church, we had that mental conditioning that we could be bad or be made to
Mm,
look bad, and it really just we're all going to get where we're going, and nothing that you do on this earth is going to stop you from getting there, whatever it is. And so trusting in the fact that you can just live your life, and yeah, you want to always try to choose the positive and the up vibration things, but doesn't mean that we're not going to make mistakes and you're not going to be
right.
punished for that. That was a huge paradigm shift in my head, from growing up in
That
religion.
mistakes don't equate to punishment. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. That's a big one.
Yep. Exactly.
Um,
That one took a while
yeah,
to
I bet.
integrate.
I'm impressed you've gotten there. I was raised by a perfectionist dad, and he's lightened up a bit, but he lives in,
Hmm.
4 states over, so I don't see him as often. Now that he's mellow and chill, the cool dad,
Yep.
he was,
The dad to
yeah,
our
exactly. He was
grandkids.
so not that dad for me. I'm the oldest. I got it all. My sisters, maybe not as bad,
Same.
but, especially the youngest who's like,
And then by the time they
oh
have the
man.
baby, they're like, "Oh my
I know.
God,
It's
really?
like they
You
didn't
did
have
that?
curfews.
Oh,
I was spanked a lot. I was grounded a lot.
yep."
Which I,
And then they're out going to concerts on a weeknight,
oh yeah,
on a school
I
night. I'm
know.
like,
It's like, how
what?
does that even happen? So if you're the youngest and you're listening, congratulations, you drew the lottery
Yeah,
ticket, maybe, but
yeah. You can thank
that's
us for
right.
that, okay?
Yeah, but so for my dad, he was raised by a perfectionist, and I'm pretty sure his dad was raised by a
Yep.
perfectionist. So it was a long line of perfectionism, and we don't have boys in our family. And he set up my wedding to the son I never had. Because I was like, I emulated my dad a lot more than I did my mom, and
Yep.
but that also meant that I wanted to try to meet his level of perfectionism, and it's actually what drove me to go.
Exactly.
He could have cared
Excuse me.
less about college. I'm the first college graduate from my family, and then I went on
Hmm.
to get a doctorate, and I didn't know why. I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it, and my dad's kind of like, yeah, and I'm like, what's it going to take for you to say you're proud of me,
Exactly. For real, though.
And then
I
he's like,
totally
well, I've
feel
always
that.
been proud of you. And I'm like, what? I just got 20 years of school now. But, it's actually a huge
For
learning
real,
because it
though.
was so externally focused. And that's one of the things I wanted to go back to is you're in
Exactly.
school and you want those chords, you want that good GPA for you. And it's not,
Yep.
yeah,
And that's
that's, I
true.
think, a huge thing.
It kind of started by that external, we're supposed to have a family, we're supposed to have kids, you're supposed to go to college, you're supposed to get a good job. Those external things were external and weren't happening for me until I internalized that and wanted
Yeah.
that for myself. So that was
Yeah,
very
that's a big
difficult.
transformative piece as well. I call those the shoulds because it's like they just rule people's lives, and I just have an issue with that particular
Yes.
word and
It's,
its meaning.
yeah, yeah, it's true. And it takes a long time when you kind of built your life up to meet those expectations to then
Yeah,
internalize it and go off of your own internal system. It can be frustrating and take some time
yeah.
and
There's
patience,
some trial and error involved in that process for sure,
Yes,
and recognizing that
yes,
mistakes are growth opportunities and not things to be hassled about. And,
yes,
that's. I mean, there's
yes.
so
So
much in our
true.
culture that
So
reinforces that
true.
mistakes are bad even today, and it's like, it doesn't need to be that way.
Exactly. It's so difficult. And, that comparison factor, that we have sometimes, it can get you down
Yep.
pretty quickly.
That's when I think it's really important to start going back to that card I pulled about our own unique qualities. It's like it's such an important
Yes.
piece, and especially if you find yourself
Yes.
comparing. And I think I don't want to speak for everyone, but I know I still sometimes compare. I get caught up in that trap, but I'm like your
Hmm.
anger thing with I'm pulling myself out of it quicker. It's like I have my own
True.
things, that that are different than other
True.
people's. And I like being different. You know?
Exactly. No, I love that. That's such a great attitude to have, you know. I mean, with me in like
Yeah.
the moderator group, like I'm surrounded by all these people who are like so great at what they do. And I mean, it's hard when I think of my talents compared to theirs. I'm like, nope, Chris, stop. Don't even go down that
Yeah.
road anymore. You can't. Just stop.
And it's probably another one of those things where they see all of the, I mean, I can certainly see your gifts, they can see your gifts, and
Exactly.
it's such a nice supportive group. The moderator group, I'm not a part of that group, but every group I've been in the Lightworkers Lab has been incredibly supportive. Just
Oh,
such a cool
so
group.
true. And it definitely in the space that, you know, wherever you go in the lab or any class that you take, it always has that same
Yeah.
piece of it, you know, like everybody has that compassion, a focus on finding those light spaces wherever they are in their journey
Yeah.
or path, you know.
So,
I just love it.
well, we have about 9 minutes left. I know.
Oh my goodness.
I knew it would go fast. It just always does. Well, I was going to ask you if there are things in particular that have been influential in your life in terms, I mean, you said Dalai Lama was somebody, but are there books, are there things that you're reading more recently now that you're just really inspired by, or people you follow? Crystal will automatically be in the show notes.
I was going to say, definitely Crystal and Compton. I mean, I can't not have an interview with her and talk about my growth without mentioning her. Certainly, Lauren Antifermo and her Body of Light courses have been definitely life-shifting and supportive of that shift that I went through at work and in my personal life. That was really foundational to those changes, was going through those courses and finding that internal source of creation and feelings and stuff. I really, unfortunately, you know, with the books and stuff, it's more with
Yeah, I
school and
forgot.
stuff,
Okay, yeah.
reading those
Yeah,
books.
you know, it was
The one book that I have read that was kind of paradigm shifting was The Divine Matrix by Greg Braden. Crystal actually got me that, she gave it to me, her copy at the first retreat. And really, it's just so condensed with information about shifting our perception of what we're experiencing here on Earth. So it's a really great book. I haven't even gotten through it. I mean, I go back and read the same chapters over and over and over just to integrate it. So it's a very condensed book. It's not easy reading, but that's a great book. But really, I've just, like this year, I've just been focusing on the lab and the courses that I'm a part of here. So that's kind of where my study has been.
What classes did you take of Crystal's? I have Lauren's down, and I have Crystal's YouTube channel.
Yep.
Yep,
the Body of Light program. I've done the Psychic Development Circle. That
too.
Well, yeah. But the Psychic Development... No, what was it called? Intuitive Intensive. Okay. Yeah, I did that at the beginning of January this year, and they're going to start doing that again next year. So basically what I did is I went to the retreat, did the Body of Light program, did the Intuitive Intensive, and then I did the Online Practitioners program, which was fantastic. And just like preparing you to get online and start sharing those gifts. And then we did another Body of Light program, and then the Psychic Development Circle.
Yep, that's going on right now.
I feel like I'm missing one. Yes, which has been fantastic. I really love seeing and supporting people that are going through their practice of gifts and experiencing those. So it's been very fascinating to see those people.
Well, and
develop.
I think that it's so, I've gone through that program as well, and I love Lauren's take on the role the body plays in this experience, in this life. It's definitely created a shift for me in many different ways, and just... Oh, yeah, Christian mentioned business coaching program. Are you in that? Yep. Is that the other one?
Oh, yes. And then, thank you. I was like, I know I'm missing one. So Crystal had a psychic business coaching course, which was fantastic as well. So, yeah, I've been very busy this year. A lot of new experiences, you know, a lot of different shifts. I still look back at the beginning of just this year in January when this all started, and to see how different my life is now is just like mind-blowing.
And it's amazing, and congratulations. I love talking to people who have experience these types of transformations. And, you know, it's like,
Yes.
you know, you're an inspiration. So thank you very much for that.
Oh,
Debbie also
my
mentioned,
pleasure.
Debbie Grasberger Schmoll, Channeling the Angels class. Did you take that as well? Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
See, I'm all over the
Well,
place.
I'm just sitting here thinking, you know, these classes are content rich. There's a lot to them. And the business coaching program
Yes.
and the OPP are things where
Yep.
you are doing things as well. And so you're doing that, plus you're
Exactly.
doing school, plus you're working full time, plus you're a dad of 2 girls. Wow.
Yep.
I know that
I don't
is,
know
you
how I do
do
it.
have
I
that, you've
swear.
got that Hermione thing ingrained. You know, you don't need a little thing to twist and turn. You've just got it figured out. That's pretty
Nope.
impressive.
It's gonna happen,
That's
and we're gonna
right.
make it work.
Well, I just want to thank you again for being on the show. As you know, I have been wanting to have you on here since I started. So, you know, it's like you're one of my target
I know,
people.
I'm
It's
so
like, oh, I want
excited.
Chris on the show. So, you know, definitely come back and do it again if you're interested. I would love to have
For
you.
sure.
And
Definitely.
thanks. You know, we've got a couple minutes left. Anything else you want to say before we say so long? We just have like 4. Yeah.
4 more minutes.
And if not, that's okay too.
I think we kind of talked about a lot, like no comparison, you know, it really is about trusting, you know, I mean, just because I'm up in the lab and in these groups doesn't mean that I don't ever doubt myself, and just push through it, you know, trust yourself, trust what you're getting, and know that you're so supported by not just people living, but your ancestors and people who have passed, you know. It goes back to that energy never dies, you know. Some type of energy is still there supporting you. We can't really always define it, and that's not a definition isn't always needed, you know.
Well, and I agree. I'm just thinking, there was a conversation I had with Tina, and we talked about that energy never dying part. So it's like Tina Guarino. And so just for those of you who haven't watched that conversation, it's another one that's, I mean, they're all really awesome. I encourage you to watch all of them.
They are awesome. I'm just so proud of you and your show and how much you've really grown and developed since I've met you too. So I definitely see that shift in you as well. And I'm just so happy that you had me on.
Me too.
I'm excited to come back.
So we have 2 minutes left, but I did see a question, and I don't know if you can answer it. I'm trying to think about it, but what class program do you think is best for a beginner? This is from Amanda Merle.
I would start with the Body of Light.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, yes, it's always like with the retreats and stuff, that's always so great to be in the actual presence of people's energy. And I think that's wonderful. But sometimes the teachings are a little bit more elevated beyond the beginner level. So with my recommendation, because that's what I did, was the Body of Light, because you do really get to have this support system internally built from this program, and you stop looking externally for things. Doesn't mean that you're not ever gonna want external validation, of course, but that gets built into you so well. That's when I first started channeling, was in that, after doing the Body Light program. I'm in the one for the Light Workers Lab right now, and I went back to my book that I did in the first Body of Light a year ago, and it's just amazing to see the information that I was getting channeled through me at that time after 2 classes. So that is a huge shift. I also think the Intuitive Intensive is amazing.
I know they're all
I mean,
great.
they really all are.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong. Anytime you're, even if in the development circle, anytime you're putting your intent to learn and to grow, you're going to get that. So
awesome. Well, thank you again. Thanks everyone for watching.
You're welcome, Megan.
And we'll see you next time.